Hi, welcome to the Scientistsage Sangha. And tonight we are talking about arousal. I got so aroused I didn't even say what it was. So, my name is Nancy Anderson Dolan, and I'm with Wise Heart Wellness. And the idea of talking about arousal, I thought, wow, if I put that on there, I wonder what people will think. And that's exactly what people think about it. Yes, I can see the faces of the people here with me live. So I'm there going, But now I don't want to disappoint you. Most people think about it just in like a sexual way, and that's important, don't get me wrong. But what we really want to talk about is like what we call arousal and hypoarousal. I'm a little too excited about that. And hypoarousal. So hyper is when we get really, really excited, and hypo is when we're under aroused. Because arousal is a continuum. And so it's not just one thing that happens one place. And interestingly, I started studying this about 15 years ago. And I want to show you a picture that the man that I started studying it with, Dan Siegel, had this idea of window of tolerance. And the window of tolerance is when the arousal that you have is optimal. So optimal means I can go about my day, I'm interested in it, I'm able to function well, all sorts of things like that. I have appropriate responses and my emotions are regulated. I'm not like crazily excited about something, like how people got about toilet paper um, during COVID, and people would go, oh, we got it, and everybody would get really overexcited about that. Too much arousal, and it's not too little arousal. And this is the end of the continuum that people don't see so much, because when we have a lack of arousal, it doesn't mean we're just overly tired. That can be one of the factors for sure. But there's what's happened is in our nervous system. And our nervous system has had too much. And so it ends up just sort of shutting down and it doesn't want to do anything. And we can't control sort of which reaction we might have. Most of us have both. And a lot of the people that show up to speak to me about things are bouncing back and forth from hyperarousal to hypoarousal. And they're having trouble taking care of themselves and being in relationships, and they're not able to resolve things and settle down in the optimal arousal zone. Things that are happening seem to either be really overwhelming or they are too challenging to approach, and people just go into that hypoarousal. And it feels like having really wild mood swings, but really it's this arousal issue. And if we can work with that, and often it shows up with all sorts of the typical things like trauma and stress and those kinds of things. But I'm going to show you his newer picture, which shows a better idea. You'll notice the optimal arousal zone here in this particular diagram is quite large, and the other ones are smaller. And there was the hypo arousal is larger than the hyper. Okay. And then we're going to go to this next diagram, and I like it better because it's friendlier. But this is a diagram of the window of tolerance. And so you can see here that there is this whole idea there. And just that when you go out of this, just a minute, I'm just going to try and bring it down a little bit. Hope I'm not making you seasick there. This hyperarousal, there we can expand it and see what it's written. If I just drag it down, there we go. Sorry about that. This will make your arousal a little problematic. Don't look away if it's distressing. So literally up here, the hyperarousal, it has grown quite a lot in the last few years. This is a 2020 diagram. And so it really has grown a lot. And people really need to understand it, because a lot of the things in our world are encouraging us to be in that hyperarousal state. And whether that is you need to buy this thing, or this awful thing might happen to you, or you need to go over here, And there's so many things that you're not being well aware of or good enough in. And those kinds of things drive us into that hyperarousal. And media itself can do that. And even if it's just games that people are playing, that sort of thing, it can literally wear you out. And this idea of increased responsiveness, we're into reactivity. And when we notice it's just dysregulation, and it's sort of, we might be more agitated than normal, we might, get upset about something. And instead of that going up and then coming back down, we we find ourselves staying distressed about things. Someone was talking about today having a stressful relational conversation, feeling about it, and I said, well, could it be related to these other things that were stressful that happened to you? And they looked at me like, maybe. And I said, well, what I would say is that those kinds of situations are always anxiety increasing for you, but the intensity of it might be caused by the combination of that thing happening and you're already in a hyperarousal state from this other thing. And when we talked about that, it was so clear for her, like, oh, okay, right. I did overreact, and it wasn't just that thing, because normally, I get a little bit stressed about that, but I don't get that far agitated about it. And so we can notice when we're going into dysregulation, and sometimes when we're in just dysregulation, when we're started, maybe we're snapping at people, things like that, and we're not we're not comfortable, we're uncomfortable. And so we're uncomfortable, but it's not the same sort of out of control thing. And when we get into that hyper arousal, we don't feel like we're in control. We can't remember things and we're getting angry at people, and the response from other people can tell us as much as our own feelings. So those relational things we can look at and go, okay, that person, it looks like they're responding to me like I'm doing something weird. Now, we can't always read that when we're in hyperarousal, but it's a good clue too. And so when we think about that, we can pay attention here. And if we understand this idea of the river of the life in the blue in here, if that's what we want to be in. But when the window of tolerance gets bigger, it flows easier. So there's more room for the volume of our life to flow through. And so it's easier. When the window of tolerance gets smaller, so we have more distressing things, more things that are shutting us down or setting us off, then it gets smaller. And there's life feels like it's moving faster because all of our life still has to happen, but it's moving through a narrower space. That window of tolerance has narrowed so much. And so we also end up in the hypo or hyper more often because the window's so narrow, we're wandering over off onto the other sides. And there's a great idea of this that, I'll see if I can get the picture for us. I don't know if I can. Okay, we'll just discuss that literally, if we are in the river, we're going along fine, but we're getting distressed. We go to things of chaos or rigidity, and typically the hyper up here is the way of getting into the chaos is what we would call it. And so things feel chaotic. You can't quite get a grip on them. We're kind of angry about it, and it's an abnormal state. And down here, the dysregulation down here looks different. It's shutting down. And so again, it's too much. We just can't handle it. But we shut down and we just feel too exhausted to do anything. And we might actually just go into that freeze, like we avoid people and we stay in bed or we try and sleep more. And often we're not sleeping well, we're just laying down more. But we're doing less. We get sort of frozen in place. It's harder to take action and do things. Where unfortunately, on the other side of things, on the hyperarousal side, we're maybe doing things, but they're not tending to be very constructive. We're running around trying to put out fires and just make yourselves feel better a little bit by doing something. And so this idea, this picture that I prefer to the earlier one, it also talks about you can, when your window of tolerance is shrinking, either way, if you feel like you just want to be shut down or if you feel out of control, you can notice that those things are happening and go, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I can't put out that fire right now, or just step out of life for a while. But what are the things that I can do and to expand my window of tolerance? And I might be able to expand my window of tolerance by doing some of the things listed on the infographic here, the meditation, music, those kinds of things. But I also encourage people to find out what's just for them. And this is fairly well laid out in the email that I send out with these. And if you are watching this without ever seeing the email, you can always contact me at scientistsage@gmail.com. Tell me the word that you're looking for, and I can send you the email on it. So in the email, it talks about a lot of things that are possible to work with this kind of thing. Okay. And I'm just going to bring all that up. And I put a quote in from myself because it's how I've learned about life. How we attend to our arousal states determines how well we operate in our lives. And so if we don't notice that we're sinking down to that, isolation, just not being comfortable doing anything, it takes so much just to, prepare a meal or things like that. We can pay attention to that and go, okay, there's an issue there. Or if we're noticing that we think everybody is an idiot, we think that, that wasn't fair, or we're afraid of things. And some of these things are really obvious, but lots of times it's not so much. I was talking with someone, I was out at an event on the weekend, and I was feeling afraid of people. And I don't like that because I don't consider myself a person who's afraid of things, but I could feel that in my body. And of course, it wasn't from the event. It had nothing to do with the event. It was just a feeling that I was having that I could actually see when I was in a different scenario. And literally, I was able to come home and go with the next thing that opened it all up and move through it. Because often when we're getting those uncomfortable feelings, and sometimes we don't pay any attention to them until we get way over to that, hyper kind of stuff. And when we do that, there's usually been several knocks on the door to say, there's this feeling back here that you might want to process. But we don't always answer the door because we're not always that fond of feeling those things. But literally, there may be so many things. In my own life, there were so many, like from trauma and addiction and attention problems and life challenges. And it doesn't matter where they're from. But when I learned that I could widen that window of tolerance and that I could affect those states of arousal, because what happens, and I mentioned it at the very end of this email, is that the state that we're in, if we are in it too long or too frequently, that becomes a trait. When you hear people talk about, grumpy old man, it's just a state that has been practiced too long. Or when that woman's just, a killjoy, that, and it's like, it's just, it's a state of fear usually that has been not recognized and not processed, or what Daniel Siegel calls integrated. And integrated is just, oh, wow, I'm having this feeling, not even sure what it's about, but I'll sit with it a little bit and I might get to know what it's about, and you might not. You might just have that energy of it come up. And if you can allow it to move through your body, then your arousal will go back to normal. But most people start to feel it, and the arousal comes up like this, and they get a little scared, and they go one way or the other. They go into the hypo and they go, just shut it all down. I'm not going to be in my body because my body is telling me things I just don't want to hear. Like, go away. Or it's scaring me because I feel like I could hit somebody or yell at somebody, and I don't want to do that, so I got to tone it down. So often we have this opportunity to learn about it and move it out and get back in the middle of the river of life, but we don't always take those things. So delving a little deeper, really the describe just a description. My mouth wasn't quite working. A lot like my computer earlier. So we're trying to get both of us working at once. So the hypo arousal is talked about as a silent saboteur because we don't know and we don't suspect it as much. If we're really about ready to yell at people or throw something across the room, we kind of notice those things. But when we just back up from life, this emotional numbness, and we start getting trouble concentrating or even get dissociative, and we don't really feel involved in life, we might, and people always say to me, well, I'm just too lazy. I'm like, no. Hey, not leaving your house for 3 weeks is not laziness. There's something else going on. Rarely do we just draw in like that completely. And of course, there can be circumstances, but it literally starts this thing about not knowing what it is. So we describe it as some kind of personal default. And when we do that we're having more self-criticism of I should be able to deal with this and I'm not. And so we don't do the things that might actually get us out of it. Because if it's just a personal flaw, what the heck good is, doing a craft? Well, if you do a craft or a puzzle, it actually starts to break your brain out of hypoarousal. But I'm not going to do that if I am attacking myself. And the other end of it with hyperarousal, that constant alarm kind of thing. And so, like I often move into this because of my attention problems. I lose my car keys frequently. And whenever I can't lay my hands on them immediately, I can move into that constant alarm. And I have to actually go, wait a minute. We don't know where they are at this moment, but we don't know it's a bad thing. And it actually served me really well this weekend when I had actually locked my keys in my car at one point. We solved that problem, went off to a lovely concert, and I enjoyed the concert tremendously. It was a wonderful, calming, arousal thing. I got back to the car, and I'd actually left the spare key in the door of the car. But if I'd been thinking about that all night, I wouldn't have had a good concert. Yeah. So it's useful to pay attention if I feel that constant alarm. And it's important to bring ourselves down a bit because I tell people all the time, I work with a lot of people with eating disorders, and if our body says, this is an emergency, we will eat emergency food, which is high calorie, high kick. And when people eat high calorie, high kick food, it calms their body for a little bit. But it's like that knock on the door that you're not answering. It comes back and you get more things, and then you have more problems from it. And it has a particularly nasty outcome because your digestion isn't working, and then you put the emergency food in, and it can actually cause lots of gut biome problems that lead to immunocompromised problems and all sorts of things. So it's so important to get a handle on the constant alarm. It's more than just anxiety. There's lots of muscle tension, rapid heartbeat, digestive things, sleep disturbances, and racing thoughts, things like that. And we're going to talk about how do we deal with this. So I would never leave you with that, let me scare you and put you into constant alarm. See you later. No, we'll go down and talk about, but what it has to be is a personalized toolkit. I talk about my medicine bag and the things I have in it, but it needs to be this personalized toolkit. And the tailoring strategies, we try things out, we do exploration, and notice which ones work for you at different levels of arousal. Because it's all well and good to say, sit and have a cup of tea, take a big breath when you're really distressed. So if someone is thinking, oh my God, my partner's been in a car accident and will never come back, they're not likely to be able to execute those things. But if we can pay attention and have some awareness, we can hear a story like that and just like, wait a minute, is that true? So if we practice thinking just when we're talking, like when I was showing you dysregulation as opposed to the hypo or hyper arousal, if we can notice at that point and start to back it down, or if we notice even afterwards in the aftermath and notice that okay, I thought that, and then of course they got home and they just had a flat tire, or they, had to stay late at work or whatever, or phoned me and I hadn't looked at my phone because I was busy panicking, things like that. So when you pay attention, what helps at what points, it's even more helpful. Okay. But now, and I'll apologize to everybody with the newsletter. I'm actually going to send it out with the right problems. Apparently, my computer was having a hypo problem because it just kept repeating some, headings that weren't accurate. So, first of all, but really talking about doing a sensory audit, notice how you are experiencing things. Do you get overstimulated easily by noise or light or touch? Or are you somebody that's always seeking more sensory? Because if you are in hypo, having sensory things like even a fuzzy blanket or a strong peppermint tea, things like that that have some sensory input can be really helpful. If you're way over the top, usually it's a calming down kind of sensory thing you need. And by knowing what your sensory things are, you can work more carefully with that. Experimenting, like I say, this is an exploration with grounding techniques that engage senses, like weighted blankets, calming music. When I'm having a really busy work day, there is calming music playing all day long in the background because I need to just be able to stay calm. Otherwise, my focus just goes off when I'm feeling too like, oh no, there's that many things to do. I can get into it and make it happen with that background noise. Or tactile things like patting a dog, or kneading dough is a great one. My kids did that in kindergarten, and they would have all the kids knead dough, and all the kids were totally calmed down after that. It was amazing. It was just a really good thing. They have these little cushy things in bubbles right now. It might be a square thing, but it squishes out in different shapes, and so many people use them. So many people use them to just calm down, hold their attention, things like that. And so the next one was supposed to be movement audit, because movement is another powerful regulator of arousal. And the type of movement matters for us. In hyperarousal, a gentle, slower, those kinds of things. Last night, somebody phoned me just about tipping over, and they said, can you walk backwards around the room? And there's quite a long silence on the phone. But when they tried it, they could in fact walk backwards, but you have to walk slowly when you walk backwards. But the person was so far gone, I thought, well, you're just going to sort of stomp around. If you walk forwards, that won't work for you. You got to go beyond that. And so this stepping backwards brought it down. And so you really have to, like say, it's about reading the room for yourself and setting that up. For gentle rhythmic movements like rocking, even just rocking back and forth. You don't have to have a rocking chair. Things like that can be really useful. Walking very, very slowly around a room, if you can at that point. But lots of people, if they're angry or frightened, they can't. They're like, no, no, no. And they start like that, but their thoughts are moving so fast that their feet start going faster. So it's really very specific. And things like yoga that are kind of small and that sort of thing, small movements, pretty slow. You don't do a bunch of jumping around in yoga. For the other side of it, the hypoarousal, when I'm not feeling able to do anything, I have gone as far with people about saying, can you just, while you're laying in bed there, put a foot on the floor? Can you just walk to the next room, or walk out your back door around to your front door? And small things that people can do. So when you're trying to move yourself out of hypoarousal, that not doing anything, feeling like a rock feeling, it starts to increase your heart rate. And if you can dance, That is my go-to for everything. If I dance, then I feel better. But whatever works for a particular person. So it might be just, walking outside, putting your feet on the grass. I'm outside, I'm moving. And if it goes like that, can I do the next thing? Might I be able to, walk the dog? Or might I be able to dance for a little bit? Or might I be able to go for a run? So it's a matter of sort of scaling yourself up as it works for you. Because there's lots of people, that don't have that kind of ambulatory access. And so it has to be different. And for years, I had one of the glider rockers, they're called. And somebody gave it to me when I had baby. But it is a great thing for settling down because you can go really fast in them or really slow. So it doesn't matter which side of the arousal uh, continuum that you're on, it'll work. So try out different things. So now, but another big thing is the cognitive thing. When you're really far gone, physical things are probably the easiest to execute. And that will get your brain back. So you'll have a little more room. And then because the thoughts are, I can walk in and say one thing to a person and I can get them either, in a totally frozen state or a totally excited state. And that happens to us all the time. And we have triggers we don't even know about. Somebody walks in with a red shirt and that was about something. The example I used in the addiction treatment program I worked in last night, I was using this example about how do you feel when you see a policeman or a police person? And everybody tenses up. Like, yep, we're heading up to that hyper arousal here. And if you can stay calmer, the interaction with the officer goes better. But most people start by, I wasn't doing anything wrong. And then the police go, why are you acting so guilty? you know? And so I convinced them quite quickly it would be a really good idea to be able to cognitively reframe this. And literally, if I go, oh, this will be interesting. Not, oh my God, am I going to get a ticket? What's wrong? It's okay. So challenging catastrophic thinking and noticing when we're using that. Like when we project the worst case scenario, which often we do. And particularly if you've had a lot of negative experience built up in your life, those kinds of things can hang in your body and your brain for a long time. But it's useful just paying attention. Has something happened that I'm like, oh, know about? Just a minute. Let me think about this sec. Maybe it's not so bad. And just even that little phrase, maybe that's not so bad, or this is going to be interesting, simplifying it so it doesn't drive you one way or the other. And literally, then when your brain is going too fast for anything like that to be interfering, engaging in activities that startle your brain into different things. So things like really speak slowly, and your brain will go, what the hell are you doing? Or really sing your thoughts. Your brain will go, what's going on? And it's wonderful because that's the snap we need. And it'll change things. So you might be able to think differently by actually using different thought paths. But you have to have something that is beyond the norm for you and not diminishing what you might be feeling. We'll get to emotions in a minute. So if I say to myself, don't be so stupid, my head goes twice as fast. If I say, that's just stupid, that it doesn't work. And if I say, don't be like that, or did anybody, ever have the experience of either delivering this line or receiving it? Don't be so whatever. Upset, don't cry, don't make things so difficult. Often in relationships, there's, you make it too complicated, there's a difference. And that's not what's going on, but it causes this hyper arousal. So other things that can change that. And for hypoarousal, I talked about this a little bit about just doing something like a puzzle or reading or just doing a small step different. And it's tricky because we don't want to move into more escapism, which we can with different things like playing a game or even puzzles and reading and that. But it really is about if I can change my mind about having to do something, figure something out, then again, it activates everything in here, all the prefrontal cortex, and it stops generating worries and problems for a few minutes and just goes on to something else. I've had people even just dump a drawer on the floor and reorganize the drawer because nobody's going to leave the dumped drawer on the floor. Your brain is like, I have to do something about this. And so your brain starts thinking about the drawer. So there's lots of ways to bring it back. But again, it's so important not to be punishing and not to be diminishing the feeling. It's just like, yes, I have a concern and my brain is taken away with it and it's causing me to shut down. So if I do this other thing, I'll be able to work with the problem better. And so if we understand it in that way, we're helping ourselves as opposed to stop that, don't be foolish. That just doesn't do it. It causes more trouble than good. Journaling is good too, but it's again, you have to work with it in some way. When I had a dear friend who died, I walked out of a hotel I was in and found this journal that said, "When nothing is ever going to be okay again." That was a title on the front of the journal. It was the perfect journal for that moment. I bought it, I went, I started writing in it, and it helped a lot. But like I say, it depends on the need. And you may find certain questions that can help you based on your life experience of triggers and glimmers. And triggers are things that upset you, glimmers are things that make you happy and calm. And so you might have particular triggers and glimmers that you can journal with. And then that just leads your brain somewhere else other than around and around in circles, jumping up and down. Um, then about introception, internal body states. If we know more about that, if we have more awareness, we can notice the shifts in arousal before they escalate, and we can attend to them effectively. I have people, often phone me and say, I haven't talked to anybody in a couple of weeks, and I thought I should just do that. I'm so glad you picked me. And they just notice that. So they're not so far that they can't do it, but they notice then they're getting in there early. And if we practice paying attention to, it's sort of like a daily assessment. How much stress do I have in my body today? And okay, my computer just minutes ago was not working well. And so like nothing. I couldn't all the side plugins were dead. I couldn't turn on the lights or the mouse or anything, the camera, nothing. But I knew I was talking about this tonight. And so I was like, okay, dear, let's just sit down and take a break. Shut the computer and patted it. And I remembered this trick that a computer person had showed me. And so I shut my computer, flipped it over, and there's a tiny hole on the back, tiny, tiny hole that you stick a paper clip in. Just stick the end of a paper clip in, let my computer over and go. Okay, said a few prayers and opened up. Everything's working again. I wouldn't have thought of that trick if I hadn't been able to bring myself back from the edge. And I often get these kinds of things when I'm talking about something like this. I get an experience that I can really work on. And so I was literally just, okay. It ran through my head like, oh, I'm just not going to do it tonight, or, blah, blah, blah. And after I tried some things and they didn't work, but I just sat down. Okay, what might be it? And taking a breath, you notice. Okay. And another thing, I was just talking with someone today, they had a really, really painful trigger. And it threatened to really tip them over. And I said, what I want you to do is literally imagine that energy that has come of this trigger, not the person that created the thing or anything, not you having feelings, just the energy of what's going on. and step back from it a bit. And so you're not going to go back to being a young person who was in that state that was utterly overwhelmed. You're going to have that energy and it's going to sit over there. You're going to back up into today and be this person who has lots more presence and desire to release that energy and be over here seeing what you can do with it. And that visual can be really helpful because it just, if you use that change of cognition, you pay attention to what's going on in here. Because in here was just lit up like a Christmas tree. There was not going to be anything useful coming out of here. So this visual of just putting it over here and backing up to today, where I'm okay in this room, the house is not falling down on me. I'm healthy. Yeah, I can look at this differently. I can look at it over there. So taking the distance, you'll notice that your body calms down when you just take this imaginary distance. So it isn't about not having a problem. It's about you attend to the problem differently. And this is what Daniel Siegel calls integration. And in integration, you get into the river. So it's not that you don't have life problems. It's not that you don't get triggered, but you have different ways of working with them. And you get different information. Your body will tell you things. And that's part of the other paying attention inside. I really encourage people to, anything they put in their bodies, take a time every once in a while and ask if that's a good idea. So, and it can be anything from, a supplement to a food to, you know, something somebody says to you, because that's going into your body. Pay attention to those subtle health cues and notice. Often when people are trying new medications, the thing I tell them is to make sure that you are seeing what good it does and if there's any problems it causes, both things, so that if there is any problem that isn't worth the good, or if you're worried about a problem, that you'll be in contact with the doc and say, okay, here's what's happening. I don't feel so good about that. And often we don't, because we give the authority to a doctor or, that idea that they know what we need. But we know how it works in our bodies. They don't. They can't be in our bodies. They're only working on the information we can give them. So we don't want to give them, a shred of information and say, make your best guess, buddy. That's what we do. But if we can go back to them and say, yeah, that really worked like this, but I'm having this sensation, is that. And because sometimes what will happen, people say, no, it just didn't work. And then they'll up it or add more, but if they can get all the information, okay, I felt a little bit less tired, but I'm feeling kind of angry all the time. And that's a common thing that happens with ADD meds. That kind of information can be very useful. And then the medical people that are working with you can help adjust in much better form. So really listening to your body about even foods. Lots of people have been recommended certain foods by dietitians and they don't work for them. And they find out, way down the road that they had a sensitivity to them. Because when you spend too much time in that hyper alert or hyper aroused stage, often you develop sensitivities to all sorts of things that you don't necessarily, maybe you weren't born with them, but then you develop them. And different things that change your body can create that too. Shortly after I got pregnant, I developed a wheat allergy. Never had one before, but I didn't know that. And I found out finally after the baby was born, because the baby was upset all the time because the wheat allergy outcome was going into their body. As soon as I stopped, the naturopath actually said, stop eating wheat, the baby will stop crying in a few days. It's like, wow, it's magic. But our body tells us things all the time, but we don't know how to listen. So lots of paying attention to your body. And then rhythm is one of the things. The rhythm informs of routine, maintaining consistent practices. And it doesn't necessarily mean you go to bed every night at the same time. That's not a bad thing at all. That's a good thing too. But sometimes we just have to follow a routine or a ritual, and the time can shift. but if I'm following the same routine or ritual, I still get good outcomes. But the idea about connection and activity schedules as well. A lot of time, I had a very busy weekend, and my body was just worn out. And I came home and I literally was like, okay, I have to really calm it down here, or I wouldn't get any sleep because one night I hardly slept because I was so up. And so I took way more time to calm down before I went to bed, and I had a grand sleep. It's great. But so we don't mean to be rigid, because remember, rigidity is that other side where it's not good, doesn't work well for us either. So um, prioritizing rhythms of rest and stimulation, connection and solitude, physical and mental. So if I only use my brain and I don't use my body, and or vice versa, then I get out of balance. And I also add in the having a reasonable balance of the material world and metaphysics. So I'm in the material world, but there's also worlds way beyond that. That it isn't just, you know, this tree is like that, and I'm like this, and they have to be like that, and I got to do this work. And it's like, what are the other things in my life? What are the things that make life meaningful to me? Maybe I have a spiritual practice, or maybe it's just nature, but making it be more than just the material world. That's often something that people miss, and they're only chasing things in the material world. Um, and the circadian rhythm, things like that, on how it affects your arousal, because some people try to work against it, and some people have a different circadian rhythm. So again, that's a really personal thing. It's not just everybody should get up with the sun and go to bed as soon as it goes down. That's not everybody's rhythm, but we want to pay attention to it, because it may be your rhythm and you're trying to ignore it. That'll cause you more problems. And working with the rhythms of nature, of course, just the, winter is a time when people go in there and do less, living differently, living in sync with the changes in the weather and the light, and even traditional food supplies. And there are a lot of books on eating with the seasons, and there is quite a good bit of evidence about that if we eat with the seasons, and we don't have to, because of course we can get food from every season from somewhere else, but there's some good evidence about working with that. And I'm just going to talk about sacred space, and then I'm going to close because no, we're good. Sorry about that little aside. I was checking time. Um, the sacred space. Let me come back to right here. There's a lot of diverse ceremonies and gatherings, and just simple seeking something beyond ourselves to help ground and guide our bodies and minds as we go through life. Because if we are just reactive, that's the biggest problem with being hyper aroused. We get very reactive. And so if we have things like this that help us ground and be present, and it can be simple as a knitting circle, or it could be as complex as, long ceremonies like in the Catholic Church when they're waving the incense and doing those things like that. And it doesn't really matter what they are. It matters how you connect to them. And doing those kinds of things help us feel like more than just, okay, I got to get the checklist done and make sure the children don't die and have a clean living room. We need to be beyond that. And we want that. And if we don't get it, we can go into that hypo-arousal. So we don't have enough arousal for regular daily things. Because this idea of something beyond ourselves has been around for 100,000 years. This isn't just a new idea. This is not new age. This is ancient age. And it has always been that societies that have something like that are healthier than those that don't. And we can notice in our own society, it becomes more important to have things than to care for people. And it can be really difficult to reconnect. and even doing personal journeys. And personal journeys might mean, you sit down and you meditate, or you go on a vision quest, or you just walk in the forest once a week, asking for signs and strength. And I always say simple instructions, because if I get an indication from, beyond myself to do something and I don't feel I can do it, I will literally look up and say, do you have anything easier? Or could you be more specific how I can do that? And I don't know if I'm having a conversation with anything. It doesn't matter. I'm having a conversation with myself, at least, about, no, can't do that. Oh, yeah, just a minute, I could do that. And it opens different parts of your brain. When we're in that overstimulated way, are we narrow? We see negative things, we see less hopeful things, and we don't have the ability for all of our brain neurons to interact. They literally don't meet anymore. They're scattering, and our memory gets bad. And so what happens is, even if we have an experience, maybe we learn something, but we're all wound up, it doesn't store well in our brain. The memory of things that are going on don't get placed well where we can find them. It would be like throwing something in a drawer, and maybe you have carrots and socks and, light bulbs all in one drawer. That would make you crazy. You wouldn't know where to find anything. And so when you calm down out of that hyperarousal, your brain stores things better. It's like, no, the light bulbs go in this cupboard and the food goes in the fridge. And oh yes, the socks can stay in this drawer. And that's how your brain actually works. So the more you calm down, the better retrieval you have of things and the better of understanding. And you don't have to live on reactivity of what can I do in this moment. And so whether you're doing ceremony or hanging out with people, or some people just hang out and have a touch point. I was part of a group for a long time that just did that, just had a circle. We got together and chatted. And I have spiritual groups that I gather with. And I'm a 12-step person, so I can gather with those kind of groups. And, it's a discussion more about life than just, did you see the stock market today? Or have you tried this new kind of toast, we need those things. We need that sacred space. And so however you make it in your house or your heart, you just think about that part of it too. It keeps us out of that hypo and hyper area of arousal. It keeps us in this good integrative, being able to have enough arousal to do things, what Siegel calls optimal arousal. We want to be encouraged, and we want to be excited, and we want to be a little daunted sometimes. We just don't go off on crazy things. So we want those walls on each side, or fences, and we want to be able to jump back over the fence if we've gone too far. Because it's not like we're not going to have fluctuations. Really want to be clear about that. We will have fluctuations, but we can build our own middle way. And as you find through exploration, some of the ideas and actions will keep you in that middle way, in that river, and you'll feel it. It is literally like flowing down a river. And when I can feel that, like, oh, this is good flow, and this happens and that happens, and I've done something that turns out really well for something later, and it just that's it. Those things might have been out there, but if I'm in that arousal, I can't see them. They're over here and they're available to me, but I can't see them. But when I'm relaxed and it's, out here, my window of tolerance is much broader, and it includes those things. So I can look at that and think, oh, that's just what I need to fix the back gate. Or, oh, this would be a great birthday present for so and so. And my life flows, because not the magic be out there, although I believe in that very much so too. Like the remembering in a moment there that I could start my computer all over again with a paperclip. I believe that's magic, because it was in my head, but I wouldn't have found it if I was in that other state. And so it's so important to remember for you, what is your way to come back to the middle state? For me, part of it is in the morning, I do a very specific thing, because, as I've said, I have attention to things. So I can go into the bathroom do a couple of things and walk out. And it's like, wait, don't go out. Take the supplements, wash your face, brush your teeth, brush your hair while you're there. And then you can leave the bathroom. And so little rituals like that keep me in the window of tolerance. And it's because I have attention problems. Not everybody's going to have that, but there will be other things. We all have our stuff. And so finding out what works best and, trying trying out what we hear or trying out something different than we've been doing. Because if you're having trouble with either the hypo where you just don't feel like doing life, or the hyper that life just feels too much, then there's room for adjustment. There's a whole window of tolerance that you can keep opening further and feel more comfortable moving through it. So, like I say, this isn't a broken thing that you want to fix. This is like, oh, this is just, I'm looking for a little different path. That one looks like it's a little less uphill. I think that might work. And where our brains are really easy to trick, for better or worse. We can trick them into thinking, oh my God, it's a crisis. And nobody functions well that way. We get sick, we get tired, and we just get overwhelmed. We can go, okay, there's a problem. How will I deal with it? And it's wonderful actually to be with people in, when there's a true crisis like a car accident or a fire that have that ability because they have worked with it and they are able to keep it like that even in the face of things like that. And we can have it for our daily life. We can have that calmness and that ability and that wide open window. So if you have questions about these, please feel free to contact me. Send me an email, questions, comments, because I love to get the feedback because I want to be able to explain these ideas as clearly as possible for people so they can make the most possible use of them. So even if you have something that says, I don't like the way you described that, I couldn't make sense of it, I would love to hear that too. So scientistsage@gmail.com. You can send comments and questions and always ideas for new things. And if you want to support this work, send donation. So thank you so much. We're going to take 5 minutes just for a quick little meditation on this idea of arousal. So if you're with me live, or if you're seeing this now at this point in the video, just get comfortable for a minute. You can close your eyes or full screen if you want to, if you're on there. And just take a little breath. Mm. And just notice the state of your body right now and the level of arousal do you feel in your body. And remember, it might be positive, sexual arousal, you never know. It might be positive enthusiasm. And it might be a bit of overwhelm or worry. But just meet it, see what sensations are there, and see what ideas are going through your mind. It might be like, oh, it's good to take a break just like this. That's a good note. Your body and brain might be looking for more of that to stay out of the hyperarousal zone. And your body might be saying, this is too hard. That's a good message too. It is that I'm feeling like everything's too much. And you might work with some of the ideas we've spoken about to work with that hypo-arousal. And just notice if you feel tension in a particular place in your body. Lots of people store tension in their bodies and they don't know it's there until they take a moment. And just releasing that tension can be helpful for both differing states of arousal. And we might actually think about, oh, okay, my chest is feeling so tight. or my shoulders. Yeah, I need to sit up. Or even just shake out hands. Sometimes the energy builds up and people don't realize that they feel that in their bodies. With the constant onslaught of life, we can be overwhelmed by what's going on in our own bodies and not notice. And you might just ask your body, is there anything you need today that I might be able to do for you? You might find out your body wants a nap or a glass of water or some time off screen. Just listen. Often people get up and go to the bathroom in rooms live or online. The body said this is what they need. And lastly, just imagine a space where you might be. And it could be a real space, like somewhere in your home, or it could be an imagined space, like out in nature somewhere. But a place where you could be in that middle of the window of tolerance, in that river of life where it just felt comfortable and things would flow. Mine, of course, is always in a hot tub, preferably not a hot tub necessarily, a hot pool out in nature is my preference. Because my body just relaxes into it. And I feel very alive. So just see what can work for you while we're doing this meditation. And I will say goodbye to the people that are watching online. Thanks so much for taking a look at this. Again, I'm very interested in any comments you might have or any questions or things you might like us to discuss one night. And you can do that at scientistsage@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us. I am with you. You are with Blessed Be.